Hello, everyone. Today, we are going to talk about modern attacks and their mitigations for container and Kubernetes infrastructure. And I am Artem Bachevsky, and I'm glad to be the first talk on this track. And it doesn't work. Yeah. And here I am as a dependency researcher. And a little bit about me. I came to application security to cybersecurity from development. I have about 15 plus years in tech and cybersecurity. And in my spare time, I do some researches and talk about them in dozens of conferences worldwide. And sometimes write in my Telegram channel, monkey see, monkey do. You could see tag here, and then I'll give you a QR. Please subscribe. And what we are going to talk about today. At first, as I said, is the container and Kubernetes vulnerabilities and weaknesses, how we could detect them, how we could mitigate them. And I think on a Monday, you are returning to office, and what you should do the first. What was the first step to do your infrastructure more secure? And first, I want to talk a little bit about life cycle of containers and maybe some points of action in their life cycle. The first stage, as I think here, is a build step. Is going in CI/CD on CI Manager, for example. There are a lot of them, GitLab, Jenkins, Bamboo, a lot of them. And what you could do here, you could implement some checks, some scans, for example, software composition analysis here, or something like that. Then it's going to registry, and you could do some checks, some continuous checks there, and monitor vulnerabilities inside your images. Then you are going to deploy step. It's called CDP, continuous deployment. And I think the best point of control here is the admission controller. Admission controller is a plugin for Kubernetes that allows us to validate and mutate all requests to the Kubernetes API. And I think Roman, on the next talk, will tell a little bit more than I said here. I think much more. So keep your places after my talk, and you know more about mission controllers, how to use them. And this third stage is the runtime stage. And here you could control behavior of your container, behavior in container, some configurations on orchestrator. You could control attack surface on a node itself. OK. And as you understand, there are a lot of points of control, a lot of assets that you could control, and a lot of weaknesses, misconfigurations, and vulnerabilities. And smart people from Mitre organization group them into several tactics. You could see 9 of them here, from initial access to impact. And each tactic contains some techniques, and we will talk about them today. What you should understand about this matrix, that it is not required to adversary go through each of these. He could go back and forward, start, for example, from credential access, and then do some execution, or start with discovery at all. There are a lot of such matrices for Linux, for Windows, for large language models. And also there is one for Kubernetes. Originally it's from Kubernetes, and they developed in 2022. But here you could see the matrix from RedGuard. It's a little bit updated. And what you should also understand is that container one and Kubernetes one are very similar. have a little difference, but it's not too much to make a big deal. How you could use this? At first, I think you could use it as a heat map. If you are trying to secure your infrastructure, you should understand what measures you do to mitigate each of these techniques. And you could color it in some colors. For example, if you mitigate still web session cookie, you could make it green. If you don't do nothing for example, the data destruction, it could be red. And then, by this heat map, you understand that it's OK here, and there is some difficulties with mitigation, some techniques, for example, on persistent step. And also, this could be a checklist to do some researches, do some investigation of incidents, some forensic, when you're going through all the steps that hacker could do, and try to find some indicators of compromising. And this also really good work as a checklist, or checklist for maybe some learning something new in container security. And we will start from initial access. It's about when the adversary is trying to get into your network. How he could do it? The easiest way, and the most, I think, popular way, is to exploit some public-facing application that is accessible from internet and go through it. Or use some external remote service, SSH, some Grafana or something like that's available from internet also. Or you could use some accounts, some credentials that may, for example, default for Grafana, or maybe they're weak, there's weak passwords for them. Or go through the cloud, use some cloud credentials to get into. Or you could use some compromised image in your infrastructure at all. Or, for example, commit kubeconfig file in your public available Git, and then you could delete it. But as you know, Git remember everything, and internet remember everything. Or it could be just application vulnerability, or expose the dashboard in Kubernetes. How we could mitigate them? At first, if we are talking about compromised images, we should deploy only images from trusted registries and use trusted-based registries. How we could control it? It could be controlled with some digital signing. Cosign, I think, is the best tool for this. And you could use it in admission controller. Then you should use third-party identity providers. It helps with the threats that, for example, I said for kubeconfig file. OK, application security. It's the golden thread, I think, of all this talk. It's go through every tactic, because a lot of practices of application security helps with the threats that we see here. At this point, such practices like SAST, Pentest, Dust will help you to find vulnerabilities in your applications and mitigate them. And also such approach like software composition analysis help you with mitigation the vulnerabilities of some external, some public vulnerabilities that you can find in some frameworks or libraries that I use. By statistic, about the 70% of your application, it is not your code, is some external code that I use from open source or something else. Then it's credential policy. It will help you with not using default accounts, don't using some weak password, for example. And the second golden thread is limitation of access to our resources over the network. How it could be done? It could be done with the policy engines, policy networks that are implemented by CNI, and also with some type of firewalls if you are talking about communication between clusters. The second one tactic is the execution. If the adversary is on our network, now he's trying to execute some malicious code. The easiest way to do it is to use something like pod exec in container, or just deploy some new container and run malicious code in it. Or it could be not container, something like Edge app in Kubernetes. Or he could use SSH server. I don't know why you could use SSH server inside the container, but anyway, it's also the way how you could do it. And exploitation of some remote code execution, or something like code injection or system injection could also help adversary to execute some malicious code. What should we do? The third golden thread is the restriction of RBAC. For this, you should use the principle of least privileges, and I think every talk in security could be considered in one idea. Use the principle of least privileges. And here you also should use it. I don't know why you need to allow pod exec to somebody in your infrastructure, so deny it. And also think carefully about who could create pods deployments, daemon set, etc. in your infrastructure. Then use read-only root file system here. I mean, so not allowed to write in the directories or modify files in your base image, and again, application security, it will help you with identifying vulnerabilities in your application, and container SA will help you with finding something like SSH on your attacker surface in container. And restriction network traffic also will help you. For example, if you are not exposed, and if you now allow something like 22 ports not accessible from nowhere, it doesn't matter. Do you have SSH or no? Then, persistence. Again, by statistic, about 70% of containers doesn't live more than 5 minutes. So, if I am an attacker, I want to have some foothold to continue and develop my attack. So I'm trying to do it, and how it could be done. And again, I could do it with some new containers that I could introduce in this infrastructure. It could contain some reverse shell or shell at all. Or I could create some new accounts, some new credentials in some external remote service, for example. Or it could be also done with the cron job that regularly will call some CNC server. Or I could go through the node and do something like container escaping and create my foothold on a node. Again, control RBAC permissions. Don't allow to anybody, to anonymous roles and users to create new pods. pod security standards or pod security policies is a security feature in Kubernetes, and it also use such things like admission controllers. So I think Roman will talk a little about this a little bit more. One more approach is to use some restrictions, some limitations on node load time. If your node not live more than, for example, a day, it will also help to decrease the level of persistence of attacker in your infrastructure. Image signing. Image signing will help with identifying and authentication the image that you are running in your infrastructure, and it will be harder to run the new container in this infrastructure if you have something like checking of digital signature. And also you should have privileged credential policy to mitigate the risk with credentials that we said before. Okay, I'm an attacker, and I'm in a network, and I could execute, and I have some foothold. But I'm just a regular user, and I want to be a root. How could I gain more high-level permissions? One of the most popular ways here is to escape to the host. There are a lot of tactics to do it. Most of them are linked, are referenced with using not some misconfiguration in mounting some sensitive directories on a node. For example, something like etc, like a root directory, a lot of vectors here. Or it could be done by using some vulnerability in process with more high-level permissions. For example, Docker-D, yeah, that is use root, and if the Docker contains some vulnerability, public available, that could be exploited in some ways. Or it could be done with using some cluster admin role or accessing via cloud resources, because the most cloud services have something like web console. Through this console, you could gain more permissions that you have, like a tracker inside. What to do? And again, pod security standards. Try to limit the use of cluster admin. In most cases, you don't need such role, and you could replace it by some more targeted permissions. For example, you don't need a role that need to get or list some secrets in Kubernetes cluster-wide, and you should do it with more targeted, in targeted way for namespace or for deployment only. Also, limit the number of privileged containers, because in most cases, the exploitation of or execution in privileged container allow you to make an escape from it. There are not too much cases when you need it. I know several one only. And again, restrict your airbag and use application security. We talk about it later. And defense evasion. What's about it? You are in an infrastructure. You could execute something, you have some permissions, but there is some security measures inside that infrastructure. And you don't want to be detected. The first way to do it is to try to disable or modify security tools. Modifying of tools or rules in it's better, because the disabling of some security tools could be detected on some CM or by SOC team. So you could try to add some exclude rules or to delete some specific rules that could detect your activity inside. Or you could just remove the indicators of compromising. It could be something like logs inside container. It could be Kubernetes events. Or you could use such approach like masquerading. You are trying to looks like legitimate a set. For example, use name like Cilium with 2 L's inside the default namespace. And if the only security measure is the eyes of DevOps, you could go through it and nobody will understand that it's some illegal malware, some malware activity. I think that's all here. And again, network access restriction. If you have no access to some security tool from the set that you are hacked, you cannot modify it in most cases. So use something like policy, network policies, firewalls to restrict access via network. And again, control and limiting RBAC on pod creation. Store everything you need outside of your cluster. It's about events, it's about logs. Use something like CM that is related over this network and use to insert the records about the new events, the credentials that are not allowed to delete for the records inside it, only to insert and not to update and not to delete. And again, restrict access to host mount, because if your events, if your logs are stored on a node, and the adversaries have access to file or directories to delete or to update them, it is a way how he could delete the indicators of compromising this infrastructure. And in some cases, encrypting of sensitive information will help to obfuscate the places where such indicators could be found by the adversary. Okay, the credential access is the most common tactic, I think, because adversary is trying to steal and find some credentials that could help him to make some impact. And he could get in some ways. The first one is brute force. He could try to guess the new credentials, I think, with high-level permissions in your internal services. He could find something new in your configuration files, or try to list maybe Kubernetes secrets, or use maybe malicious admission controller to see everything that are creating inside the cluster at all. So how to mitigate it? At first, use secret management. Again, controller bug permissions. We said about the listing of secrets. Think about more targeted ways to do it. And enforce your credential policy to not allow to use weak passwords, use default passwords. Also, I think there should be something like block the accounts, the IP addresses that try to guess your password. Try to guess your password is about mitigation of the brute force vector. And I think try to introduce such tools like Git leak or something like that to find some secrets that you could find in your code or in your infrastructure or in your container, for example. And again, discovery. For example, I'm like an adversary. I attack some service, but it's not very interesting for me because it's, I don't know, some login service, and I want to find some more interesting. How could I do it? At first, I'll use such approach like execute something like an nmap and try network service discovery. It's a good way, but it also could be mitigated. Also, it could be done by calling some Kubernetes or kubelet API and finding through and identifying all the infrastructure via orchestrator. Or it could be done through cloud API. In some cases, cloud allow us to understand where we are located and what is nearby us. Or it could be also done with some legal ways, like accessing Kubernetes dashboard. So observability here is not our friend. And again, control or bug permissions to not allow to call API to anybody who don't need it. Limit access over the network and use the network segmentation between clusters. Container SA will also help with that, because if you have some tooling to allow network mapping, it is a bad way, is a bad case. Using such tools like IDS or IPS will help you. Some of them based on the rules, some of them based on behavioral analysis. Most of them implemented in more complex container and Kubernetes tools. And in some ways, they could identify such vectors like calling and map, like some unregular behavior inside container. And user account management also helps with mitigation of discovery. And then, if you like an adversary, like a hacker, if you identify the new service, you want to move inside it. How you could do it? The easiest way is to find some credentials to it and just to move to this, or do it through the cloud. As I said, the most cloud services have something like some execution console, and you could just go through this way. Or you could do it through the node, because if you're on a node, you have access to everything that executed inside on this node. Also, the ways like poisoning of DNS on RP could help you with getting of control over the new targets. And what about mitigation? The audit is just a regular measure to understand the ways how to do it, like an encrypting sensitive information. Restriction of web-based content will help you in cases when you are allowed to authenticate in some service via something like OAuth ways. So if this is internal service, it shouldn't use such approaches. And again, least privilege model, least privilege principle helps in mitigation of every tactic, like limitation access to resources, and network segmentation, and application security, and pod security standards again. We saw everything in previous parts. And the final one, impact. On this step, the adversary is trying to violate one of our features, is our availability, our confidentiality, or our integrity. The easiest way to do it is just to remove our data or upgrade some numbers in my bank account, or doing some regular DOS for endpoints or via network way, or maybe hijack my resources and mine something like Monero on my infrastructure. How to mitigate it? At first is the data backup. It's a regular measure, but it helps. Like in filtering network traffic, it's mostly about for something like leak protection, and if you understand that some illegal data going through your channels, you could do some response for it, and for example, the block such channels. If you are going about the stealing of data, if you are talking about the stealing of data. Also, the monitor of resource utilization will help you to identify, in some ways, the hijacking of your resources, because some miners show you some specific behavior of CPU using, and it could be identified with some behavioral tools. And again, least privilege principle will help you in that. OK. When I started to prepare this talk, I added the slide with the name "How to Protect," but then I understand that it's a very huge amount of information that I should say if we are talking about how to protect is hours and hours of talk. So I rename it "What to Protect," and there is some, I think, 6 points. And the first one is the application layer. And if you want to protect your application in your cloud and for your Kubernetes security, you should use some application security practices. We talk about them is SAST, SCA, Pentest, a lot of them. Use it. If we are going to a container layer, there's such approaches like container security tools could help you. And using such approach like distroless is a way to decrease the surface of attack of your container by decreasing the number of binaries frameworks that you include in your container, in your image of container. Distroless, I think, right now is a narrative name, but initially is a name of operation system, not operation system, of base image, I think, from Google. Then, orchestrator. Kubernetes security tools will help you there, and using such way like policy engines will also help you. Node. Think here about the using container-specific OS is also the way of decreasing the surface of attack of your node, and operation systems like Talos is a good way to do it. Again, network. Using firewalls, next-generation firewalls will help you here. And network policies, we said, is a mechanism that are implemented by CNIs and allow or deny some traffic between your pods. And if we are going to cloud layer, there is also a lot of way to attack. But common measures is to use some, again, security tools like CNAPP or more specific one, CWSP, CSPM. There are a lot of them, really. And CNAP is some platform above it. OK, what about the returning to office and what to do on a Monday? If you are a developer, think about using some SCA tool, some software composition tool in your CI/CD or maybe in your development infrastructure, and try to build the distroless image of your service. If you are the architect, you should understand how you will implement network policies, how you will generate it. Some tools allow to generate network policies on behavior of your containers, and you need just to review this draft and then just apply it. And then network segmentation will also need you. You could do it with some cloud services or firewalls if you're using some private cloud, for example. Then, if you are DevOps, implement policy engines in your CDP and think about the using of container-specific OS on your nodes. And if you are application security or security DevSecOps, something like that, use runtime security tools. I know there will be a talk about Falco. I think there will be some useful information that you could knew about runtime security. And maybe some more complex container security tools. And in most cases, they include generating of network policies, using vulnerability management. Some of them use policy engines, and really helps with identifying a lot of threats and mitigate the threats inside your infrastructure. And is there a way how open source could help you here? Yeah, it could. If you are talking about runtime security, there is you could use Falco, Tetragon. If you are talking about policy engines, is the Kyverno in an OPA gatekeeper. There is nothing better for vulnerability management and SCA for containers than Trivi. And for benchmarks, you could use Kubench. It's good enough. And that's all. Thank you. You could subscribe to my channel by QR on the left side, and you could leave feedback. Please do it on the right side, QR. So thank you, and I'm ready to answer for your question. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Artem, very much. So, dear friends, thanks to our general partner, XNest, we have a present for the best question asked. So don't be shy. Raise your hand if you want to ask a question. Yes, please, gentleman over there. And keep your hands so I can see you and organize Q&A.
Hi. Thank you for presentation. Hypothetical situation. Your kubeconfig was stolen. It can be cluster admin kubeconfig, it can be developer or something else. Doesn't matter. How can you prevent it using? It's a first question. And
could you repeat one more time? How could you?
What should you do to prevent using of this stolen kubeconfig?
Storing or stealing?
Stolen. Somebody has your kubeconfig, your cluster admin kubeconfig, and it is hacker.
You shouldn't store it somewhere outside, and the config shouldn't be the only way. It should be only the one factor that are using to authenticate inside the cluster. If I understand you correctly, you should use approaches like two-factor authentication also inside your cluster.
Yeah, you said how can we prevent it, but what should we do if it happens already? If somebody already have your
if it's already installed. Okay, good question. At first, you all need some scripts for it, yeah, for your security operation team. I think it's a really bad situation. Looks like a lot of communications, a lot of reputation risks. At first, I think you need to get back all permissions that you are already provided to somewhere and do communications and provide them the new one. You need to block the old one credentials at first. I think we need to talk about it more properly, because there is a lot of ways how we could deal with it. And we should understand, this is only our private cluster, our private infrastructure, and we could deal with services that are located here. But if it is a shared one with a lot of, for example, of our customers, it is more complex case. And for this one, I don't know how we could deal with it right now.
Yeah, thank you. One way I found is change certificate authority. And looks like it's only one method to prevent it.
Yeah, I think it will help.
And it's very difficult. Thank you.
Thank you. More hands, please, if you have. Don't be shy. Yes, please, over there to the right.
Thank you, Artem, for presentation. I'm Alex from XM. In all IT systems, we have a root level privilege, like admin, something like that. And in Kubernetes, we also have in Kubernetes rollback, we have also admin level privilege, right? And we can't just disable it. We need this for manage Kubernetes cluster and etc. Do you have any suggestion how to secure admin roles in Kubernetes?
As I understand, you need some cluster-wide permissions to accessing to every resource with some asterisks.
Of course, yes.
Why do you need something like that?
Okay, to create resources to make some maintenance thing and something like that. And when you just create the cluster, you have this role, right? And you cannot, I don't know, just disable it because you need these privileges for some stuff.
Could you split up it, for example, between namespaces or something like that?
Yes.
I think it's the first approach that you could do. As I said, these more targeted permissions here.
But we have, in general, okay, we have this level permissions role inside the Kubernetes, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, we can make another roles for some teams and get access, but you have still this admin role inside your Kubernetes, right?
Yeah, is the risk and the real risk. You shouldn't share this role and access to it to a lot of your, not customers, not your users, yeah? It should be only in several rare cases with really need. You should also store this for some credentials, for it in a vault or something like that. Is also approach how to decrease these risks. But the main advice here is not to use such thing like a cluster-wide permission. And I think the first we need is to brainstorm how we could forbid from using such thing. Maybe there is ways how we could do it.
So to create more roles with granular access, right, for some teams, and grant it to the users, to some automation system, something like that, and never use admin access for general, for daily tasks, only in some critical situation.
Yeah. For very custom task, in real rare case, it shouldn't be used at all on a regular job.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, please, here. Yep. Grab mine.
Okay, thank you. Let's assume what we implement everything you said, and worst case scenario happen, and our application has been hacked. how to investigate it with short-living containers, short-living nodes, and so on.
Good question. I talk you about some more complex tools, and some of them allow us to look for example, for a history of how the resources in our Kubernetes cluster was modified, by whom it was modified, in which way. I think the first indicator that we could use in forensic. The second one is our CM tools. And as I said, all your events, all your logs should go to the CM. And if we have some correlation between our events, we could do some links, some graphs, and by it understand what was done by the adversary in our infrastructure. Then there is a way of doing something like snapshot of RAM, snapshot of the file system, in cases when, for example, we kill our container, if we understand by some rule or some behavior that it was compromised, and by these snapshots of file of RAM, we could understand what way the adversary have before doing some stuff that was detected. It could be something like fileless malware inside RAM, or it could be some exploits or some exploit kits on a file system, or we could see just for something like in history in a bash, and it also helps us with identifying the way and the source how adversary is get in our network. I think this is the first of the three most useful way how to start with the investigation of incident.
Thank you. So I think we're up on time, unfortunately. So please, if you have any more questions, please grab our speaker. Short one. Really, grab a mic, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Artem, for your speech. It's really wonderful, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with the audience. So my name is Andrew. I'm an HR for a recruitment agency called the Tribe, and it is seen and evident that people nowadays then tend to be not to be that interested in big salaries, big companies' name, all those fancy relocation packages. So my question is that, in your opinion, what shall companies do to get professionals, devoted ones, such as yourself, to get them interested? So what shall companies do? Thank you.
Short question, yeah.
Yeah, I think
As promised.
We need maybe some drink and have an evening and talking about it. I don't have the answer right now. I think let's talk in the hall maybe and try to figure out what we could do to solve this.
All right.
Okay. Thank you. So before our best question, we have another present for another gift for our lovely speaker. Please, a round of applause. Thanks to our lovely general partner. Thank you very much. And who's the best question?
I think the question about the forensic and investigation was the best because I really forget to talk about it in my talk, and so I like it. Then
gentleman to the left. Yes.
Yeah.
Please, a round of applause as well. And thank you, Artem, very much.
Thank you.
Don't forget to rate the talk. See you later in 20 minutes, please.